I'm delighted to welcome Vikramaditya Sharma for our LinkedIn segment of our sessions with students I've worked with in the past. Vikramaditya, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about the company that you run in a very innovative design research field?
Hi, Arjun. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to kind of talk to you about this. I am Vikramaditya, and I run a design studio called Nowform. At Nowform, it is a research-led design studio, and we're working with enterprise companies on their technology platforms using design research. So we've been working with some of the largest companies in India on their business platforms. So we worked with SBI Card, we worked with Marriott, just to name a few of the organizations. Outside of that, we also are looking at using design research, design communications to help foster and engage with local communities. So we've been working on human-centered design projects to kind of address social challenges. We're looking at also just design communication for different clients in education, hospitality, retail, etc. Also to kind of foster community.
So when you talk about research-led design, it's very interesting. And then you also mentioned human-centered design. Also even looking at UI UX design for, say, clients like SBI Card. So what are the other sort of cutting edge applications of design to find solutions for problems industries, companies, or even organizations and communities face? Where do you see the next big thing?
Sure. So I think just kind of stepping back for people who aren't aware of certain design processes and methodologies, I think that when I say we're using design research, what we're trying to do is that there's certain sort of design skills and design approaches that we're employing to be able to understand and critically examine ground realities. So by that, I mean, say you're a business, we're trying to look at one, what are the kind of successes of your existing business? What is some of the shortcomings of it? What is it that your customers are looking for? What is it that what is the social drivers within your industry? Those are all things that we're trying to inquire about through design research. So that's one part of it. The other thing is, say you're not a business, say it's more of like this is a more of a social challenge. You're also looking at things like, and I'm going to use another word, which is participatory design. We've learned through trials that involving, I guess, the end stakeholder in the process helps you create much more sort of resilient solutions. So we're also understanding these people's needs, but then we're also trying to see how do we include them in the ideation, and how do we, through that, solve solve things much more efficiently, and then also solve things much more holistically. So that's what the design research side of it kind of entails. And then the next part of it was, this is more for profit, where we're looking at UX UI. So you're working with businesses on their tech platforms. And in that space, you're taking, again, what the design learnings are, and then you're saying, how does this sort of get translated onto a technology platform? And then also what you're doing is you're studying, one, where is technology headed? So you're looking at advancements in tech, you're looking at certain tech trends, and you're also looking at where is the industry today. So say I'm in hospitality, I'm looking at, I'm looking at what are other hospitality players doing, what are certain sort of best practices, then what are also innovations in that space. Then I'm also looking at the technology landscape. What are new technologies? For example, say I'm talking about chatbots. How do I leverage a chatbot for my business? That's the other thing that we're looking at. And then we're also looking at ground realities. So by that, say now I'm sitting in with COVID. I don't have COVID, but like we're sitting in a world which is plagued with COVID, and we're looking at how do you then, as a hospitality business, how do you use technology in events like COVID or during events like COVID to kind of help drive your business? So those are all of the things that we're looking at from like a UX UI perspective and like a digital strategy perspective. And then your last question, which was about, I guess, innovation and where is design headed? I think that obviously there's different design verticals and there's different kind of design focus areas. For me, I can talk to what I know, which is design for tech. And I think that right now there's so many different kind of ways in which I'm seeing this world evolve. One, I think the need for designers are changing. So by that, I mean, I think there's earlier we saw sort of UX UI as or design for tech as very limited in the sense that you're only looking at the end outcome and you're really looking at filling in kind of like one section of, you get a brief and then you start designing that brief. I think for us specifically, what we've noticed is how does a designer start kind of at the beginning of the solutioning? How do they work with like interdisciplinary with all of the different kind of stakeholders, be it like business stakeholders, IT stakeholders, marketing stakeholders, etc., to one, understand that problem statement, and then how do you sort of take that through all the way to development? So that's one of the big shifts that has happened, like in the last few years itself. And I think the where we're kind of headed is, I think now like almost every business is going to be driven by the intersection of design, tech, and business. Design has changed to be more like customer focused. And so we're looking at, I think there will be, there is emergences of like CDOs, chief design officers already in like major corporations. That I think is going to be on the incline, and design for tech is going to be on the incline. And then also design for emerging tech is going to be on the incline. So how do you, I think there's also like a need to understand, I guess, where technology is headed and sort of design. And that's, coming now into like speculative design, where you're sort of designing, I mean, that's a different conversation, but you're designing for future possibilities.
And
I think
that sounds really interesting. The speculative tech, that's a new sort of phrase I've just picked up today. That's maybe the virtual reality, immersion, technologies, all of that would be at the forefront. Anything else? Like, love to hear more about this.
Yeah, no, so I think the other thing is, and maybe also kind of the global paradigm, we're also looking at what are the problems that we're going to face in the future. So be it, environmental issues, be it issues of migration. These are all different sort of paradigms that we can sort of see like in the future, in the near future, in some places. Again, now I think what you're doing is that you're looking at how do you use all of this design and technology to address these future realities. So that's basically like, in a nutshell, what I mean when I'm talking about speculative design in this context. But I think that's also like going to be the future of design and the future of like, I think that's kind of a global future in a sense. Like, I think it's also where business is headed. It's also where all of these different kind of industries are headed. And then lastly, I think there's just coming back, maybe pre-speculative design, like I think within tech itself, there's so much change that's happening. I mean, there's the metaverse, which is like the biggest kind of buzz subject, and NFTs and all of that is kind of also happening. So I think there's also design for this new kind of digital world that we're now venturing into. And it's also been exciting kind of explore, and just coming back to actually some of the work that we've done at Nowform. Like for example, I was working with this incredible art platform called Terrain, and Terrain is India's first NFT marketplace. And that's, that was a project that we worked on for many months. And this was like right before NFTs sort of shot into stardom. And we were working on this art platform for art sales using kind of NFTs. So it's also been exciting to really see and understand tech, to see kind of where the world is headed, and then to actually get to work on these things before they become popular. So that's also been kind of an exciting space. And I think that's also the future of design, where you're really thinking about what is emerging, where are we heading, and how does sort of design play a role in that narrative.
So it's really fantastic. As to design is basically maybe the philosophy behind finding solutions, or even looking at the world in a certain way. And then the technologies that are emerging are part of that world. And so finding those connections as to what could be helping in the solutions that the design statement really made out to be. So this is a very interesting conversation. When I set out to do this interview, I had very limited knowledge, or other, maybe level of interest was also not so high, but I'm totally fascinated. To tell me now, as an entrepreneur in this design field, what kind of organization structure do you have, and what are the kind of people that sort of fulfill those roles?
Yeah, so I started Nowform a little bit over 3 years ago, and it's been an incredible experience. Like overall, it's been dynamic. I feel like that's the best way of describing it. In terms of structure, we started off with a very small team. So we tried keeping it as flat as possible, and we really tried focusing on, creating a company culture and a company like vision. And that's actually something that we're constantly revisiting. I think that whatever business you're in, like culture is extremely, extremely important to consider and to foster within like everyone. So that's the first thing I would like to kind of talk about. For us, the culture is looking at, again, how do you use design to help just solve problems, to examine problems, and then how to use it to solve them. That's one part of it. And I think the other part of it is also, there is a very sort of empathetic side to Nowform as well. You're looking at really understanding and inherently understanding these problems, and also you're looking kind of beyond self and beyond self-interest to create things that positively shape other people. So that's another huge part of the culture that we're trying to, that we intend to foster. And then the last part is actually creating a culture that also informs and positively impacts the ecosystem, the design ecosystem in India. I think the reason for that is because for me, when I came back, I felt like there was such a fragmented design ecosystem, and I still think there is a very fragmented design ecosystem. And I think that, we need to have a lot more sort of solidarity in design in India, and we need to kind of work, and if not us, if we don't create that change, then who? So, and I think it's important to kind of start now. So that's also another, pillar of the culture at the studio. And the way that's sort of manifesting is that we've also started a vertical called Nowform Research. And Nowform Research intends to publish reports on design in an Indian context, which doesn't really, I mean, it exists, but very limited, on kind of the digital paradigms. And that's one way of kind of creating and fostering community. We also were looking at other sort of community endeavors, like we, pre-pandemic, we did an open studio where people could kind of just come in and hang out and understand what we do. And then also just participating in conversations, in seminars, lectures, speaking to design students, design fraternities, studios, and not sort of being averse to a lot of collaboration, and fostering community. So that's, I think, on the cultural front. So flat organization, and now as we're growing, there's a recognition that we need more structure, and so now we're trying to put in new structures in place. But for me, I actually think of I've done a lot of research in understanding again what structures work for design studios. And there's this incredible, article published by this design studio called Pentagram, which is one of the leading branding studios in the world. And they kind of follow a very similar to a consulting company structure, where it's more like partners that have certain sort of focus areas, and within that you've got teams. So it's still it's not as much of a pyramid structure, but it's still small sort of teams that you're working within. I think that's where you kind of get to create the best outcomes. So that's the structure that we think works, and that's what we're trying to kind of pursue. Coming to the last part of it, what is it that we're looking for when we're trying to kind of hire people and bring them onto our team? I think because a lot of what Nowform is, we're looking for cultural fit. So people who have similar inquiries and are also empathetic and seeking to address similar problems. Because we do a lot of work with enterprise companies, for us, how well you're kind of be able to work autonomously, how client facing you are, all of these things are important for us as well. And I think one thing which I haven't spoken about, which I think is also very important, is also just design itself and the design output. And I think that there's one type of designer who is very interested in design research and more of the thinking side of design. And there's also another type of designer, which I think is equally relevant and equally important to have, which is who is concerned with making things that are beautiful. And I think that there's incredible power in beauty. There's power to sort of also have equal positive impact on communities through. I think what it's doing is that it's creating a sense of care, and I think that's what beauty does. So I think that for us as well, especially given the different roles that we're seeking, there are times where we're looking for people who just understand how to make beautiful things. So I think that's the other thing that we're looking for. And then there's more, just standard, things that we seek, like professionalism, punctuality, communication, all of that.
It's been fascinating knowing about your industry and how culture within your organization and even setting up such high standards for the work you do with each other and the care with which you want to sort of create the ecosystem. So all the best, and look forward to having a follow-up session sometime later. Also, let you know we run several student-led clubs, as in our students have formed groups, and some of them are really keen on knowing all that you've talked about They are artists, designers, but they definitely need more input from people in the industry. So looking forward to introducing you to a few and inviting you to a few panels.
Great. Awesome. Can't
Take
wait.
care. Thank you.
Thanks.